welcome to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney and Fricke. Thanks for tuning in. Hey friends, today's episode is fantastic. I had the chance to interview Coach Chad Carson. So you may know him. He is a two-time author with Bigger Pockets, his books with them. The most recent one came out last year called The Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor. He also had the Retire Early with Real Estate book with them. You might know him. He had a blog for a long time. He has a podcast as well, but we got to really talk about a lot of different things. So I think this is going to be a great episode, whether you're brand new. I get him to pull out some advice for brand new folks, but at the same time, I dig into, his years and decades of experience of, hey, what do you recommend for people who are, they're wanting to have some more time freedom. So if that sounds something that you might be able to benefit from, make sure you definitely pay attention, listen all the way to the end, and I hope you enjoy. All right, you guys, welcome back to the Strategic Success Podcast. So I'm your host, Courtney Fricke. I'm excited. Today we have Coach Chad Carson. Chad, I am very glad to have you on the show today. Thanks for taking your time to be with us and welcome.
Oh, I'm excited to be here and great to connect with you.
Excellent. So let's jump off into talking a little bit about, tell us, where are you based out of and kind of what do you do in real estate right now?
Yeah, my hometown where I am right now is Clemson, South Carolina. So it's a small college town for those who know college football or college sports. Sure. Clemson's pretty well known in that respect, but I went to school here actually and then stuck around. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, originally, Noonan, Georgia. Okay. But then I like the small town life. I like being near the mountains, the forest, the waterfalls. And so it just kind of met my lifestyle goals. And I also started investing in real estate here when I was 23 years old. It was less investing and more flipping and wholesaling and just try to make a living for a little while. But my current kind of business, I have a 50-50 business partner, and we transition more to being long-term buy and hold investors. We have some of the classic single family houses, like, John Schaub style houses, which I like a lot. But we also got into the niche of student housing, more affordable student housing in a college town. So the classic, we buy like the 4-unit building or a duplex, or we have a 12-plex. We have some kind of small multifamily buildings that are on the bus line, convenient to Clemson's campus, convenient to downtown, but then they're also more affordable. So they're not like the fancy new stuff. They're just clean, neat, affordable. And that's pretty much what we do. That's kind of the overall business for us.
Sweet. Are you doing rent by the room with that, or is it an entire unit type of thing? Because I know some people.
Yeah, entire unit. Yeah, when a lot of people think of college student rentals, they're like, oh, you can get a 6-bedroom house and put 6 students in there, and that's like the opposite of what I want to do. Like that would drive me crazy. Like my ideal unit, my best units that we have are single bedroom, like 1 bedroom or studios. So we get the people who had 5 roommates and they're tired of that. They actually want to study now or just have some peace and quiet. And so they live in our units. They are affordable to go to campus. They can take the bus line. I'm big into walkability, and it's like being able to walk or bike. That's just one of my personal kind of lifestyle goals. And so I like to buy properties that are also convenient like that people can get around. You still have a car, you still park your car, but to have the lifestyle of being able to walk to a park, bike to a park, bike to downtown. So I try to reflect some of that in the investment properties we have as well.
So I like that, because at one point in your career, you were able to impact your community with like a walking trail, right?
Yeah, I'm still working on that. This has been like the longest standing unpaid job that I've ever worked, but it's been a lot of fun. We started a nonprofit, we being a group of local residents in Clemson, and I was actually on the planning commission for a little bit in my town, which I sort of recommended to people. But if you want to, get root canals on, it's like the equivalent of getting a root canal sometimes, like dealing with local city politics. But
yep,
I learned a ton, and one of the things I learned was that. I was at these meetings and people were talking about what a great community we have. And it is, I really love Clemson. But one of the problems was there was no connectivity for people. If you want to walk, like if you live in your house and you want to walk to the park a quarter mile away, I would try to push my little 2-year-old in a stroller and almost get run over by a truck because there's no sidewalk and there's no crosswalk. And so I was just frustrated as an entrepreneur. And I was like, does anybody do anything about this? And they're like, no, not really. So I just got motivated, and we started a nonprofit to try to study the problem first of all, and then start doing something about it. And so that was 2014 when we started that. 2024 now, 10 years later, and we've actually raised several $1,000,000. We've gotten a lot of grants. We've got 3 different local towns. City councils are more on board with it. They've started contributing money from the budget there, and we've built several miles of trails. We have a lot more to go, but yeah, so that's been like one of my most fun projects. That's used a lot of real estate skills as well, because there's been land
Right.
acquisitions for easements, there's been fundraising, there's been negotiations. So it's very similar skill set, but it was
Right.
totally a passion project. It's just something I want to see happen.
So I love that, Chad, because it's like you took something you were passionate about, you took those skills and you applied it. And too many people probably would have quit by now.
I'm just stubborn. Yeah, you can see my football helmets in the background. I'm just like a stubborn linebacker who doesn't give up.
Well, look, I mean, the world needs people like that. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, so I love that. And so let's actually look at your journey. So tell us a 30,000-foot view. You mentioned kind of earlier that you've done a lot of different strategies, but let's kind of give a sweep across your career. What are some of the things that you've done? And let's just kind of talk through that. Like, how did you get started? What are some of the things you've done? And then we'll eventually kind of talk about what some of the pivotal moments have been in your career too.
Yeah, when I first started, I was fortunate because I didn't have any college debt, and so I was pretty flexible to, like, I could have really low overhead, but I didn't have any capital either. So like no debt was great, but I knew that I had to get into real estate more as a business, because I just jumped right into it. Like I didn't have a job. I didn't have a W-2 income. I was just sort of like, I was interested in it, and I was excited about it as an entrepreneur. So the very, very first skill I think that was really crucial for me was building like the muscles of being able to find good deals.
Yeah.
Basically marketing and lead generation, and how do you have a conversation with a seller? The classic, like, Pete Fortunato kind of lessons, and John Schaub, and
Yeah.
learning from all of them was really helpful, because they emphasize that a lot. Like, you go to a John Schaub seminar and you went out on Saturday night and knocked on doors and talked to people, and
Yep.
you learned how to have conversations. And so I was just all in on that. Like I just basically said, I have to make a living doing that. And so I learned how to buy pre-foreclosures. I used to do a lot of short sale negotiations.
Okay.
I bought properties that were just really ugly. I did a lot of vacant house searches. I sent direct mail to expired listings. I sent direct mail to eviction landlords.
Yeah.
I sent direct mail to probate. So like I figured I call it fishing. Like I tried any kind of way to find a deal that I could, and then I just practice and practice and practice and practice. So I think like my first 2 years of business, 3 years of business, I mean, I was every day talking to a seller, and that was really good training. Like I felt like if you could find a good deal, then the other part of the equation, like the puzzle piece, was, all right, where do you find the money? So I was able to go out to partners and more experienced investors. And even though I didn't have the capital myself, to partner with them. And so I learned pretty quickly how to use private money, how to use lease options, how to do credit partner kind of more creative kind of deals.
Yeah.
Not because I thought it was cool. It was cool, but it was just like, I had to do that because I didn't have the down payment literally to do it. So I had to find a way. Like I compare it to like it's like I was good at finding sweet potato pies, because I love eating, Southern pies and sweet potato and pumpkin pies. Like I would find pies at a discount, like on sale. And I would call up, somebody experienced and say, hey, I've got this pie that's usually worth $20 and I could buy it for $5, but I don't have any money. How about you put up the $5 and then we'll split the pie 50-50.
Yeah.
And essentially that kind of deal. We found different ways to do it, but that was my early career, was mainly flipping houses, mainly wholesaling houses, and then I learned to buy a couple rentals though as well along the way, using seller financing and more creative tactics with the seller, who would then allow me to cash flow the deal and keep the deal too.
That's excellent. So I love that you talked about doing a few different strategies. Especially over the careers. What were some of the pivotal moments for you? This could be whether it was changing the strategy, whatever those pivotal moments could be. It could have been meeting a mentor. It could have been whatever. What does that look like?
Well, the most significant one that I think of when I say pivots, I was, when you're a new investor or new at anything, like you just absorb like dozens of different sources of information. Like I think today's even more worse because of the internet. Well, I was listening to John Schaub and Pete Fortunato, people like that, Dyke Spotiford, but I was also, listening to a lot of other people. And I basically borrowed goals from other people who were very ambitious in real estate investing, just because it seemed like they were successful. They were like, okay, I'm flipping 50 houses per year. And I would go to a seminar like, oh, that's successful. Like that looks good. And my business partner and I like, well, we could do that too. It seems very logical that we could do it. And so we basically copied some of the goals of these very ambitious real estate investors. And we were pretty successful in a way. So 2003 is when we started. Fast forward to 2007, everybody kind of keep in mind what happened in 2007, 8, 9.
Right.
And we bought 33 properties, 33 closings, acquisition closings in 2007. Now, some of those were flips, like we flipped some houses that made 70 grand and 50 grand and 30 grand. But then some of those were multifamily properties and single family houses. And so we bought some rentals as well. And then the Great Recession, it was right around the corner. And we had a moment, I credit my business partner more than me for this pivot, but we had this moment where we were really busy. We're buying a lot of properties and things got a little stressful because I bid on a property that like was a little bit too much that we could chew. Like we just had to kind of work really hard to get this property closed. And we realized like, all right, we're moving way too fast. And so my business partner was like, we just need to slow down. We need to pause. And we did this little exercise that I'd heard of where like, why are we doing this? Like, so what's the purpose of all this exercise, all this hustle we're doing? And we did this, we each wrote down on a piece of paper what our ideal day would look like. Like if you waved your magic wand and had all the money you could in the world, like what would you spend your day doing? And my list looked like this. It was like, could I go hiking in the middle of the day? Could I play basketball, pick up basketball, which I love playing for 2 hours anytime I want to do it? I got married that year. So I was like, if I have kids, could I spend time with my kids? Could I live abroad? Like my wife's a Spanish teacher and we wanted to go live abroad somewhere. It's like, could I go travel abroad and live there for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years if I wanted to? And the answer to my question was like, well, a lot of that stuff needs money, but money was actually not the most important limitation on my list. Like the biggest limitation was the fact that we were so busy and we had this business that was like I call it like a Frankenstein business, where the business, like you put the business to life, like you give it life, and then it has a life of its own, and it starts eating your time and eating your money. And that's what we had created. We had created this little Frankenstein. And so the pivot for us was we couldn't undo Frankenstein like overnight, but we really committed to having a simpler business, to listening to John Schaub's advice of just like, all right, just do it one house at a time. Let's do it. You don't have the least number of properties possible that will accomplish your financial goals, so that you have this simplicity in your business and your life. And that was a huge, pivot for us. And it kind of led to this philosophy of the small and mighty investor, where whether you have 5 properties, 10 properties, 50 properties, it's not about having more than everybody else or the most properties. It's about how much time do you have that you can spend doing the things that are important to you. And that's the purpose of the business, not to have a bunch of units.
So I love that. Now, when you started doing this pivot, was it in the middle of the 08, 09, 2010 time?
Essentially, yes.
So kind of like the blue light special period, right? Okay, so that's interesting. So, because I want to dive into that, because I think some investors think, well, if they're, in hindsight, if it was 2008, I would just be buying, and I can rest afterwards. Well, like that comes at a cost, right?
Yeah. We did some buying too, but we ended up one year we sold 15 properties, I think, with owner financing, for example. That was one way we solved it. We did wraparound notes on a lot of our seller financing. We liquidated what we could. We found a few investors to buy stuff. So we first and foremost started like just liquidating and or just putting some of our rental properties or flips into long-term safe situations so that we weren't like bleeding money, so that we had stability. And then though, the cool thing was like most of our properties were bought with private money, seller financing, creative strategies. So when the banks weren't lending, we still had those relationships that we had cultivated who were still happy with what we're doing. And because we actually lost money on a couple of deals that we paid off our lenders, but we just like, all right, we're just going to eat it. We had big cash reserves and we had to eat into some of those. But because we did that, they were like, yeah, let's do some more deals. And so by 2010, 11, we were patient with that. We didn't try to buy a bunch in 2007, 8, 9, but by 2010 through 2016, we had a field day. Like we were able to replace some of the properties we had sold with better properties. We doubled down on some strategies that were working. We paid off some properties as well. It kind of reduced our debt load. So it was a long-term journey from 2008 to 2016, 17, I would say, was when I really felt like I was stable. And that's when I took one of my trips. My family and I went to South America for 17 months and lived off the rental income and didn't do a lot of work at that point. So it was like that period of 2009 to 2016 was I call it like a pruning. Like we pruned properties, we sold them, we refinanced, we paid properties off, we worked on our systems, we worked on our operations, we became good landlords, became good at managing. And it was all like together. We had to figure out how to be an operation instead of just flipping and just depending on the market to kind of bail us out.
So I love that. Literally, one of my next questions was in reference to 2008, 2010, but I like that you kind of pulled it out to 2016. Because in many markets, I mean, that buying period varied, right?
Yeah.
So to recap, my questions were, how did you play defense and how did you play offense? So let's kind of break down what you just shared. So how you play defense. So when you guys started noticing things were pivoting, the market was changing. So you said you had some flips that you moved into longer term positions that were safer. Like for example, sold some things on financing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say that a few things come to mind for defense. Number one, we prepared by having cash.
Yeah.
And I know this sounds really simple, but we had like 6 figures of cash sitting in the bank. And at times, like, people would be like, well, why are you holding so much cash? Like that doesn't make sense. And we would never use it. It was just sitting there. Like you could use a line of credit, you don't need cash. That was the best defensive strategy we had because we actually needed it. Like in order to fund, we underestimated repair costs sometimes. So the defensive strategy was eating into our own cash instead of having to like skip or borrow money or do something else. Like we had cash available. We had vacancies. Like we were not good landlords when we first started. So we rented to tenants who were not as qualified as they should have been. And so then we had to do evictions, and some of the properties we financed the people who we didn't qualify well enough. And we had to file foreclosures on them. And we had one, in a worst case scenario, we had 15, 16 months of somebody not paying us. And then they tore the property up. And so we had like a $15,000 to $20,000 cost on one property that we just had to eat. Like that was just I would say like that was it. Yeah, cash in the bank. I guess that kind of trumps everything.
So I've got this philosophy where it's like I treat offense like buying other people's like buying properties. I use OPM, other people's money, but to stay in the game, to keep the properties I buy, I use my money, right? Like, and it's almost sometimes where us, real estate investors, maybe you could also call us addicts. It's like you get so much money in the bank, you're like, I can go buy another house with that. And you have to have the discipline to not go buy one or, 5 houses with that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's tempting. I mean, because you see good deals. I mean, you see good deals out there, but I think I had just a skepticism, and I don't know. This was not like smarts or anything else. It was just I think I was listening to like stories like Dave Ramsey, where you hear the story of somebody like that. Dave Ramsey is a smart guy, but he told a story about how in the 1980s he had all these properties. My understanding was they were worth like $3 million, and then he had $2 million worth of debt on those. So pretty good, 66% loan to value, like not upside down or anything. But then it was a financial crisis happened in 1987 where he had all commercial notes, and his bank called a big chunk of those notes due at one time, like $1 million or something, saying, hey, in 90 days, you got to pay off $1 million. And I didn't understand how that happened. Like I've learned since then, it was probably like a balloon note, or there's this fine print. There's a lot of, in the contract of that every bank and is going to have like a big, thick stack of paperwork that they paid an attorney. They're going to find a way to get you. Like that's just, they know more than you do. Sorry. And so that really got me like nervous and skeptical about overextending myself. And so that was it. That was it. Just, I said, well, let's just pile up cash. Let's not get too many bank loans. Let's work with like partners and private investors. Even if we have to give away more of the profit, let's stay safe. And I think sounds like you're in a similar vein. If you play defense first, you can then kind of follow Warren Buffett's maxim, who I really admire. He's like, rule number 1 of investing is don't lose money. Yeah. Rule number 2 is don't forget rule number 1. Like it's just don't lose money. Like if you get to stay in the game and survive, you will be successful. Like you don't have, it's not glorious. It's not like pretty. But if you just grind it out and just survive, your properties will go up in value. Typically, you'll pay
Yeah.
your debt off, you'll learn stuff. And so I think that this is like the number one. Defense is like, it wins championships, like just like in sports, defense and real
Yeah.
estate investing helps you win.
No, I think that's critical. I kind of think it's I like your analogy with sports. I played sports too. I guess I've always seen it like a car, but it's like if all you do is play offense, it's like all you do is drive fast. Defense is knowing when to kind of pump the brake or decelerate. And I so what's tough is when people only play offense, it gets really risky really fast, right?
Yeah.
And so with defense, it was, cash in the bank. It was pivoting when you started seeing some things out and your partner, right? You credited your partner to, okay, they saw, hey, we should slow down a bit. We should pause. We should, transition some of these strategies as you was talking about. I also heard some offense though, too. You were willing to maybe take a hit. Like, for example, if you took a loss on a property, you still made your private money lender whole or the seller financing stuff whole. And that teed you up to play offense during that time.
Yeah. I think selling strategically is another. It's something sometimes our egos get in the way. I'm speaking for myself too. Like sometimes, well, I think that property's worth that, or what it was 6 months ago. When reality, that's what it is worth today. That's what somebody will pay. It's like I think my business partner and I never were afraid to chase the market down,
Right.
just to get rid of a property so that you get your money back and you live to see another day, even if you lose money. And so that's been a big thing. Like just liquidate it, sell it, move on. Like just see, you'll have another deal. As long as you survive, you'll be able to live to see another day, pay the money, pay the loss, whatever. But that's hard, I think, mentally and psychologically. Sometimes we try to make our money back the same way we lost it in the first place, or we try to make a good move out of a bad move instead of just like cut your losses. Like I don't play poker or like blackjack, but that seems to be a strategy there too. Like this, sometimes you got to lose money and just move on, fold, go to another hand. And that's a similar investing strategy that if you just lose a little bit of money or just lose a little bit of time, it's water over the dam. Like you can't do anything about that. And so, yes, I think the one of the best things that I kind of learned from sports too was I played linebacker in football. And like you always had to have your head on a swivel because you had these big 350-pound linemen like who were less stronger than you were, like coming and trying to grab you and like throw you on the ground. And so I was always, head on a swivel, move fast, don't wait. So we would sell a property quickly, we would move on. And we also, I think relationships was the other defensive strategy that could be offense too, that was really helped us out in 2008-9. Part of that was relationships with lenders, like private lenders, banks, of just being the kind of borrower that they wanted to see, like asking them, like, who would an ideal borrower be? Like, what do you want to see from us? And they said, well, pay me on time, have skin in the game, communicate with me. So like just following through and doing what you say you're going to do. Like that was a defensive strategy because you're essentially building money in the bank, kind of like cash in the bank. When you do what you say you're going to do with people, you're building an emotional bank account where they trust you. And if they trust you. In the Great Recession, trust was the thing that was missing. Like nobody trusted each other. And so there's a crisis of trust. And so if you have a little inner circle of people who can circle the wagons and they trust each other, and some of those people have money, then you're good. Like you can survive this thing. And so I really think a lot about that, both the cash in the bank and that emotional bank account of my private lender, and the people who lent me money, but also our contractors, like, people who worked with us, taking care of them. If you have employees, the tenants, like treating not all the tenants worked out well, but we really tried to turn a lot of renters into homeowners and talk to our tenants. And if we had problems where they weren't making payments or they missed their job, like don't let that problem kind of, sit there and do nothing about it. Like go actually talk to the tenant, show up at their house, knock on the door, have a conversation. I used to call those like sweaty palm conversations. Like you don't want to have that conversation because it's difficult, but once you do it, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. Like, all right, just get it over with, do it, solve the problem. Sometimes you have to cut your losses by paying somebody to leave, maybe pay a couple $1,000. So that's a long-winded way of saying there's just a lot of like personal communication and trust building and just hustling from a one-to-one basis that I think helped us out sort of to pivot and get out of the hole that we could have been in.
And I think that's huge because I was having a conversation with someone recently. Like that's an operator right there. Someone who will go get their hands dirty, go get in front of people, have the hard conversations, figure out a solution. And there's a level where real estate has to get off a spreadsheet, and you've got to go address the problem. You've got to address it head on and say, hey, how can we make this work? Otherwise, if it's all just being in an office, all virtual, there's only so much you can do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, spreadsheets are nice, but this is a people game. This is all ultimately the problems are often about people, but then the solution, the other side of the coin, the solution is about people. So you got to be willing to have those conversations.
Absolutely. So in that same vein, a lot of people, they hate, I guess, the operational side, right? Because basically they're like, I don't want to deal with tenants, toilets, and, taxes and basically all the things that kind of can quote unquote weigh down an investor. But so you wrote 2 books. So I want to talk about your philosophies in real estate, and I want to pull them from the 2 books separately. So the first one, you've got the Retire Early with Real Estate. I like to think I did my research. You only have the 2 books, right?
That's it. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. All right. So this was your first one, right? In 2018?
Correct.
All right. So Retire Early with Real Estate. So you did this one with Bigger Pockets. Talk to me about, so you go on to say, it says how smart investing can help you escape the 9-to-5 grind and do what matters more. Talk to me about some of your philosophies that you share, whether it's about wealth building, real estate investing here in this book.
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this idea that you can get out of the financial grind. Like I said, on that a lot of people, not everybody, but I think a lot of us, even if we have a job we like, we get into life in our 20s and our 30s and maybe up to our 40s where we're things were good in the beginning. We liked our job, but then you get in this grind where it's just like, it really literally grinds you down. Sometimes it's because you don't like the work, but other times it's you like the work, but the schedule's bad, or you have this boss, or you have these meetings you have to go to. I think in general, the more autonomy and the more options you have in your life, including your work life. Like I tried to redefine the idea of retirement in that book. I'm not sure how well I did, but the idea of retirement is not having to go to work just to make money.
Hey guys, Courtney Fricke here. We've got Aussie Steve. And look, if you have a deal that needs to get moved, Southeast Louisiana, even in South Mississippi, we're your folks. We are the largest dispo company, really in the greater New Orleans area, even Southeast Louisiana. We have great contacts in South Mississippi as well. Steve, why do we move more deals than others?
Just we're very deep in this market. So Greater New Orleans can be really confusing for national wholesalers. The comps are hard. We change block for block. We got flood zones. We get a lot of hurricanes and the likes. And just a lot of the national platforms don't have the buyers on their list. So we are deep with buyers, but we're deep with relationships, which is really important in this market. So we love JVing with out-of-state investors.
Like I said, we do a ton of business with other investors. So go to homebuyerlouisiana.com/Courtney, fill out the information. We'll get in touch with you and we'll move this deal along. Yeah.
It's basically separating this idea and saying, all right, there's your work, like my nonprofit that I worked on, like that's work. That's a lot of work, but it has nothing to do with money. It's just because it matters to me. It's important to me.
Yeah.
And so financial freedom, financial independence, retirement is the state where you have enough investments that you can sever the need to work for money. And then it's almost like you're starting over in life again, where you're saying, all right, I have this blank page. Like, what do I want to do now? Like, what is it? Like, what do I want to do with my life?
Yeah. So what does that perfect day look like?
Exactly. Yes. So that's going back to that whole story we realized. And so that book was less tactical about how do you manage properties, how do you raise money. And it was more of it's like a guide, it's like a travel book you would take to learn how to climb a mountain, or to go to South America or something. It was like, all right, the destination is the top of the mountain, financial independence, doing what matters. What are the different strategies to get there? How can you start? How do you, if you're at the very bottom of the mountain, how do you do your first deal? And so I talked about house hacking, and I talked about ways of borrowing money from other people, or living in a house, and then once you are done living there, don't just sell it, like keep it as a rental instead of moving it out. So it's like kind of simple strategies that would help you get up to the start of the mountain, and then as you move up the mountain, though, how do you build wealth? And then how do you keep it? How do you, like some of the stuff we talked about from the Great Recession, what are some strategies to eventually turn those rentals into income streams that allow you to travel and travel the world, or get an RV and do what you want to do, or
Yeah.
start another business, or just take a break. Like I like taking, instead of a full retirement for me, I experimented with these things called mini retirements that I learned from Tim Ferriss in the 4 Hour Work Week.
Yeah.
That book. It was basically you take 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and you pick something that instead of you waiting until you're into your life to do it, it's something that you only dreamed about doing or seeing, but do it now. Like do it in your 30s, do it in your 20s, do it in your 40s, your 50s, and then do it while you still have the energy, the health, the drive to do it. And then you go back to work. Like, hey, we're going to still work, right? Work's fun. We don't have to do it. And so I think that's the concept of retire early.
I love that. So I actually used to live overseas. I lived in Thailand 11 years ago.
Okay.
And we just went back last year for the first time. And we went for 3 weeks. We traveled to Asia. And there was just something about being able to have that freedom. But I want to get your thoughts on this. So my significant other works for a big oil and gas company. So we had to milk every bit of, vacation time and everything to be able to make those 3 weeks work. And we'll be doing it again this year for Europe. We'll go for Europe for a few weeks. And so we're still working towards that, where I'm semi, retired, but then we're working on to where I can be full-time and then they can also be. And there's a level there that the fire community it's very popular, right?
Mhm.
Especially among younger folks, like the day and age where people go and work 60 years of their life or 50 years of their life, whatever. And but then they don't have the health, they don't have the energy, all that. Like there's obviously something that's awakened with people. But talk to me about this. There's a lot of people who have this dream, but then, they want to travel, but then no one can go with them because they can't get off of work. Right? What does that look like for you?
So my wife is a Spanish teacher, like I mentioned earlier, and she had a more traditional job at a local community college. And then she also taught at a local university. And that was our, I would say struggle, but it was also a reality. And one story, this might not answer that question, but one story that was kind of fun when we took a trip in 2009, our first mini retirement, where we went for 4 months. It was before we had kids, and we went to Spain, first of all, and I wanted to learn Spanish better. So we went to Spain to start off. That was a little bit too expensive. So then we went to Peru and South America, and then we went to Argentina and Patagonia, Chile. But my wife still had her full-time job, and she had to negotiate. She's like, I just want to go off for the fall. Like I want my job still when I get back, but I want to, I want to leave. And so she took up the courage for weeks to go talk to her supervisor at the community college. And finally she went and talked to her, and she was really nervous. And her supervisor thought she was about to quit. Something was wrong. Somebody had died. And she finally got the courage up to say, I want to travel this fall. I don't want to work this fall. I know you can't pay me while I'm gone, but can I do that and still have my job? And the supervisor was like, oh, thank God. I thought you were quitting. I thought something was wrong. So yes, that's fine. I didn't see that coming, but okay. Hey, how about this? You come back and work. We'll even give you health insurance while you're gone. You need to pay for it. But it was like a negotiation that they were offering her stuff. And she was amazed. Oh, okay, that's cool. And so I guess the lesson to me of that story though, is that once you have leverage, even a little bit of leverage, it doesn't have to be total financial independence. If you just have the guy named J.L. Collins, who I liked in the fire movement, called this FU money. Once you have FU money, even if it's a little bit, you have leverage, you have negotiation. And so that was an example that we found that if wherever you are, whatever job you're in, people need good employees. If you're a good employee and you're dedicated to your company, you are an asset for that company. If they don't see you as an asset, go somewhere else, because this is a human resources market. Human beings who are excellent at what they do are always going to be in demand. It's just going to have to be flexible. And so if you have financial independence where you have leverage, go negotiate. Maybe it's 3 months off, maybe it's 2 weeks off, but just experiment with that. Try to negotiate, see what they'll do. They might let you work remotely part-time. They might let you take a month off, but if you never ask for it, you'll never know what they might give you. And it's kind of a scary game, but it's kind of a fun thing to try.
I think that's huge. A lot of people don't have the gumption to ask that and look to even turn it into a negotiation is a whole nother thing. So I love that. So I think this is a huge thing because so many people think of real estate helping them retire. But I don't think a lot of them have an idea of really ways to go about, doing that. And a lot of times they think, well, when I get 100 properties, then I can retire and go travel like you did. So let's go into your next book and kind of talk about some of your philosophies. So this one's the small but mighty real estate investor, the small and mighty, not but small and mighty real estate investor, how to reach financial freedom with fewer rental properties. You did this one in 2023. Talk to me about that because I think the trend is, you know, at least I bought into it. So I've been in the business for 10 years. Easily the first 4 or 5 years, I was chasing 100 properties because I thought that's just what you had to do.
I did the same thing. So going back to my story, like I thought more was better. I thought faster was better. And I had wise voices in my ear early on, but I think sometimes I had to touch the fire to like learn whether it burned or not.
Sure.
I had the John Schaubs in the world who had tried it too. Like John's like, yeah, I tried it too. Like I went and bought a bunch of properties in mobile home park or whatever he had, but he learned, for example, that single family houses for him were not only the simplest investment, the easiest to understand, the most plentiful, but they were also the easiest to manage. And they made him the most money for the same amount of time compared to owning big properties and apartment buildings. And so like that was a voice in my head for sure. But I also just learned from some experience that when I started owning a bunch in 2007 and I was busy, that it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. That like that there's kind of this game that we play in the United States and maybe play in other parts of the world, but that we feel like there's this top of the mountain that if you keep climbing, whether you're in a corporation or whether you're a real estate investor, like, but having 10 properties is a good start. But, once you get 100 properties, then you get to like this, another echelon. But then once you get 100 properties, then you need to start syndicating and then you can go raise money from other people and then you'll really arrive and then you can get your private jet and then you can, now you need to make a goal to be a billionaire. But you know what? Like that rabbit chase, that rat race, whatever you want to call it, it never ends. Like the billionaires are still chasing the next biggest yacht and the next biggest thing. And so like the philosophy here is like, say enough, like figure out what is enough for you. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's permanent. Like you can always kind of keep growing, but like find a plateau, like find a place in your life. And I like this, like get concrete with this. Like what number, like, is there some number where you say like, if I made $100,000 per year for my rental properties, then that would be enough. Like I could quit my job. I could have some flexibility. I could go do this other job that I've been wanting to do. And so like figure out what that is, be honest with yourself. If you have a spouse or a significant other, talk to your significant other about it, get on the same page about it. And then the math is actually not that hard. Like this is a simple math game. This isn't calculus. You can look at it a couple different ways. Like the way I like it, I learned this from John Schaub as well, is that if you wanted to make, let's say 10,000 a month, well, if you owned a rental property that had net operating income of about $1,000 per month, so maybe it rented for $1,800, and the expenses, operating expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance, management, all that was $800, you would have $1,000 left over. And if you had no mortgage, if you paid off those properties, they were free and clear, then each property produces $1,000. You would only need 10 properties to make $10,000 per month or $120,000 per year. Now, I know there's a lot of details like to get from starting to owning 10 properties free and clear. But when I started like really absorbing that idea that it's actually a finite, smaller number of properties that would actually accomplish a lot of your goals. And it would be very simple to own that. 10 tenants, no debt. Like that's an incredibly simple goal. Like, so my book tried to work backwards from that idea and saying, okay, with that idea in mind, with the goal of having the least number of properties possible to accomplish your financial goals, now let's talk about how to do that. Like, how do you get started? How do you acquire those properties? How do you negotiate for them? What kind of financing should you use? And then ultimately, like I borrowed a Pete Fortunato. Everything I teach is borrowed, by the way. There's no like originality here.
Well, there's nothing new under the sun. So
I'm rearranging ideas. I want to give credit to where these ideas came from. But the last couple of chapters we're talking something I don't see a lot of people talking about. I didn't hear from other people, was how do you actually end the journey? How do you go from somebody who has $1 million in wealth or $2 million in wealth to actually living off of that income and having a very secure, safe portfolio? And often that requires like selling some properties, maybe. Like for me, like it was, if you wanted to end up with 10, like we have more than 10 properties. I have a business partner and we have a little bit different numbers. We have smaller properties. But if you wanted to end up with 10 properties, you might acquire 15 properties or 20 properties with leverage. And then you might sell like the losers, like prune off the ones that are not your best properties, and then pay taxes on it. Like pay taxes on it instead of doing 1031 exchanges, you pay taxes on it and you use that capital plus other savings to pay off the debt on some of the remaining properties. And so I had chapters on whether you should pay off debt or not. And that's a big argument people have. Like, and I know there's arguments both ways, but then if you want to do it, how do you do it? And then how do you simplify your life in a way that you have systems and processes and a team, so that, like, I lived in South America for 17 months. I lived in Spain for 12 months. It wasn't like an accident. It was like partly financial, partly like people and systems and teams, so that I could spend a couple hours per week texting with my property manager, solving some problems, spending some money, but then I could go back and live my life after that.
Yeah, whatever. And I love that. It was by design. I'm laughing because you were talking about some influence from Pete, and then you said a few breaths later that you'd pay taxes. I said, oh, that was from maybe John or something.
Yeah. Pete wouldn't pay taxes, but hey, you get ideas from a lot of different people, right? And then you adapt it to your life. And I'm not saying, like, there's a time to be tax optimized, and there's a time to grow, and then there's a time to make decisions that are not financially smart, but that are life smart,
right?
That like accomplish the goals you have for your life. And I think that's one of the biggest things even accomplished real estate investors, especially accomplished real estate investors, have a problem with, is they get so good at acquiring properties, getting a good return on investment, growing, they get almost addicted to that idea and lose sight. And I'm speaking myself because I've been there, lose sight of, like, why did you do this in the first place? Like, what's the goal here? Like, exactly. What's the purpose?
Well, no, and I think that's critical. So let's talk through some of those phases, and I want to get your advice. So you mentioned this, in your book, but it's the seasons that we know. So starter, builder, and ender. Starter, these are people who are just getting, going. Let's talk about some of your advice for people who were in those different phases. And I love this because I think a lot of people have different advice for different people in different seasons. And so for someone who's just getting started, I heard you give some other advice like house hacking, things like that. But what are your advice for people who are just getting started, but they're like, hey, Chad, I do want to see financial freedom. I do want, some of these things. What does that look like?
I think you just got to do your first deal or two, and don't try to hit a home run, to use a baseball metaphor. Just be okay hitting base hits on your first deal or two. I think that's the key mindset.
Right.
I remember John Schaub saying that his first deal that he ever bought, he put 20% down. Yeah. He paid retail price.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a home run, but you know what? It's made him a ton of money because he never sold it. Like he kept the deal. But even more than that, I think that compounding of knowledge that happens when you do your first deal or two is like 100 times more valuable than the financial return you're going to get from a couple $100 of cash flow or something. Like the relationships you build and the knowledge you build. If you're sitting on the sidelines and you never do a deal, like, you will never get that knowledge. It's like going to school. You never punched your ticket to go learn those really essential skills that I can't teach you. You can watch all my YouTube videos. You can watch Courtney's podcast. Like, we'll teach you as much as we can, but you've got to do it yourself in order to ultimately learn it. So that's the advice I give to starters is, what's the easiest strategy, the least path of resistance to do one or two deals and just to get in the game. And that's why I love house hacking, because you got to live somewhere. Like, so if you're in a place in your life where you can afford to do it, where you're flexible with your living situation, live in a duplex where you can live in one unit and rent the other unit out, or buy a house that has an ADU. I love ADUs right now. The ADUs like California, different urban markets are really, really a wonderful strategy where you could build an ADU or two or three, depending on where you are. And maybe if you're really ambitious, like, live in the ADU and rent the house out. Like that's the better financial move, right? So somehow, some way, just get your foot in the door with a owner occupant deal, rent your existing house out, or if that's not your game, like, just find a way to buy a vanilla, like, just a safe deal that you're not going to lose on, but that you're going to learn a lot on. And don't worry about like hitting a home run. That's not your goal as a starter.
I think that's great. I think a lot of people think if I'm not making 100,000 on this deal, or if I didn't get a 2%, on rental rates or whatever, like, oh, I'm not doing it. But like, there is so much you just shared there, and then to add to it is just even that confidence, right? That like comes from doing those first few deals. You can go learn everything and every single one of the books behind you or behind me, but until you go start applying it, I mean, there is just, as you said, there's just something that you just don't learn. So, all right. So then that's for people getting started. What about people who they're like, hey, I'm actively building my estate. I'm not financially free yet. I am building it. What is your advice to them in that phase?
Yeah, I'll give two pieces of advice. One is tactical and one is more mental, like just, strategic. The tactical advice, there's only one game you're playing as a builder, and that's to turn a small amount of money into a big amount of money.
Yeah.
I know that sounds really oversimplistic, but that's just all we're doing. Like, and ultimately it doesn't matter whether you do it with real estate, or I've had people I've worked with and coached who they had $2 million from the stock market, and they wanted to diversify $500,000 into real estate. And that was going to be their like kind of income floor nest egg. It doesn't matter. Like the goal is just to turn $100,000 you have now into $1 million or $2 million. And so the question you have to ask yourself is like, what are the tactics that allow me to do that? And so this is where tax efficiency comes in. This is where leverage comes in. If you can use leverage safely, then awesome. Like that's what's amazing about real estate, is that not only is it tax efficient, it also has incredible leverage that you can use safely. You can have long-term mortgages. You can figure out creative ways to do that. You can get in with smaller down payments. You can partner with other people. So the name of the game is like, you're going to run out of money. Like your cash is going to be limited, but can you keep growing? Can you consistently add properties and grow that nest egg that you have into a much larger nest egg? That's the tactical kind of thing, a part that to talk about. But then the other side of that, the thing I think is the hardest about the builder stage, or it was for me, is this is kind of a long grind to get there. And it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 15 years, but this is like an ultra marathon of the investing world. And so I think a lot of us get impatient. We want to get there faster, and so we find like the latest greatest little technique that, oh yeah, let's do that thing, let's go do the we're doing really well buying duplexes and single family houses, but this is too boring, this is too, I'm kind of bored with this, so let me go do this exciting strategy where I'm going to buy a biotech company, or I'm going to get into a syndication where I'm going to invest with these people because they promised me 30% returns, and that's a lot better than what I'm doing with this little single family house. But then you get into things that you don't understand, and then you lose money. And now we haven't listened to Warren Buffett. Like the one thing he said is don't lose money. And we go and get, just because we're bored and just because we're impatient, we start doing these other things. So I think that's the hardest part. It's like mentally, can you keep yourself locked in? Yeah, just keep locked in. This is where many retirements come in though. I think psychologically, I'm not built, maybe don't say I'm not built to just grind for 15 years straight. I think it's unrealistic. I think some people can do it, but man, you're killing yourself. Like why do that? Instead, like intersperse your life with enjoyment, like with times when you spend a little bit of money. Like you can't always be frugal. You got to go spend your money a little bit. And yes, that might mean you get there technically a little bit slower, but you've also like refilled your coffers. Like you're now more energized, you're more enthusiastic. And every time I went on a trip and did my little mini retirements, I came back with like 10 times more enthusiasm. And now it's like, let's go, let's make this happen. And I was much, much better.
I love that. Look, people can have lofty goals at the end of the day, but if they don't have the fuel to get there, I mean, you just won't arrive. And so I love that. So for the last phase, so these are enders. These are people who are financially free. What are some of your thoughts for them?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of the opposite of the builder phase. Like we've gotten accustomed over the last 10 to 15 years of return on investment, maximize leverage. There's a story that maybe kind of typifies the ender stage for me from Mike Cantu. I don't know if do you know Mike out in California?
Yes.
I've never met Mike, but I really admire Mike from a distance because he told this story about his mentor was always like leverage, don't ever pay off debt. And he went and he sold some land or something. He got a big pile of money and he went and paid off the debt, like 30-year debt on all his best single family house rentals. And it was like the way the term I use for that now is like he created like this income floor. He's like, I'm not going backwards now. Like I'm paying the debt off. I know that's not the best, growth mechanism. That's not going to make me the most money. But what that is that gave me peace of mind. It gave me income. It gave me stability.
Right.
And that is a classic ender move that Mike Cantu did. And I like that story because I think everybody was like kind of saying, what are you doing? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's not in the game playbook. That's not what you do.
Right.
But for an ender, like that's fine. Like the name of the game isn't going from $5 million to $10 million. It's making sure that you never go below $5 million and that you have enough income to enough time and flexibility to do whatever the hell you want to do. Like that's what the ender stage is about. And so I think that's a mindset shift for me, for a lot of people, is you gotta have to change your measure of success when you get to the ender stage to qualifying peace of mind, qualifying income, and being less worried about, at least for the moment, maximizing the growth of your portfolio, because you can get back to that later. You can go make more money if you want to. And Mike, I think, has still continued building wealth after that. But he has this big, this income floor that he never has to worry about. So I think that's like the hardest thing to do, but also the most essential thing to do, is knowing when it's enough and then making a decision like Mike did.
I like that because, so you and I it sounds like we run in some similar crowds with some of the old school people, and it's a very interesting world to have one foot in the new school, world, and one foot in the old school. Sometimes it's like the devil and an angel on your shoulder type of opposition. But so earlier this year, I actually, at a Gary Johnston class, I actually took out my phone and went around to a handful of folks. And I said, hey, what is your goal? Free and clear rentals, or are you going to keep leveraging? And I said, 5 minutes or less. And I asked everyone their opinion. And I had people 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years and 60 plus years in the business. Pete did not do 5 minutes. He went 15, but Pete's my main influence. So I obviously, I'm not stopping him. It was very interesting to hear a lot of people's, responses to that. And I think that's so critical, because how people arrive. But I love the argument that you put is, hey, at the least pit, have some of them where there's a floor. You have that. Well, no, you called it as a ceiling or a floor.
Well, income floor. Yeah. Like, so
income floor.
That's actually a Jack Miller quote, by the way. Like, I remember reading Jack Miller back in the day, who said, it's hard to fall off the floor. Like, once you have a floor, it's like, you're not going back from there. And I think that's the idea, that you pay, not all of them, but a chunk of them, you pay them off. And that meets some basic goal that you have. Maybe it's 5,000 a month, maybe it's 10,000 a month. And the way Mike explains it is, every property has a job. Like, this property is to pay my health insurance. This property is to pay my grocery. It's a brilliant idea, because it connects that investment, that the spreadsheet, to real life. And it is less about growing that money, and it's more about securing that money. And then if you have good single family houses, they're going to tend to keep up with inflation. So you're giving yourself a good chance of keeping up with inflation, but then you still have your mind, and you still have your other wealth, and you might have a retirement account. Like, it's not like you're giving up on growth. You're just saying, I don't want to go back there and have to do over what I had to do for the last 10, 20 years.
Well, I love it, because you're sprinkling in some defense in that as well. I love it. I'm in the 1980s, but I usually read a ton of books, but I'm just reading through Jack's newsletters this year. And so I'm in the 80s right now. And look, I think I really like that. It's that idea of, hey, let me build in a measure where this meets the goals, and then I can go play with whatever else I want to play with and do. But hey, I know that we're taken care of with these. And so I think that's great. So as we start to wind down here, I have just a few more, but so one of the questions I have for you is, you do a lot education wise. You've got your own podcast. Obviously, you've written the 2 books. I think the very first thing you did was the blog, right? I think that's what I found years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what is the legacy that you want to leave on the investor community?
I don't know. I've had a hard time thinking about legacy and long term on the education side. As much like with real estate, I was like, I had this goal. I want to meet financial independence. I want to make this amount of money. The teaching stuff is just more of a calling for me. Like, I feel really lucky that I'm able to help other people and communicate. It's just I was the ultimate student. Like, I'm a nerd. Like, if you look at my bookshelves, like, I love reading. I love studying. I feel like I'm on the shoulders of giants. That's why I bring up different names, because I love learning. And it's on the other way around. I was also lucky in that the right people fell into my life. My dad was in rental property, so I had a really good start. I could ask him questions. So I just feel like there's a natural circle in life where once you learn something, once you build something, once you have a certain amount of stability, it's just in our DNA, it's in our culture to then like put your hand down and like help some other people get up. And not only is it just natural, it's just really satisfying. Like I get a high out of it. And I actually like teaching and what I do with my Coach Carson podcast and YouTube channel, getting that kind of feedback, coaching people, helping them just get in the weeds and solve problems. Like I get more satisfaction out of that than I do buying my own properties. Like it's amazing. Like, so I don't know about if there's a legacy there, but there's just, some of the people I admire in life outside of real estate have been coaches and teachers. Like I played football. I have a little book by my bed by John Wooden. It's the Wooden's advice on the game of basketball and life. And there's just a bunch of little chapters about, how he approached basketball. But he taught basketball, he always said, but he said, I did, even when we won a championship, I didn't know if I was successful, because really the ultimate success of a teacher or a coach is whether the seeds they planted today come to fruition 10, 20 years from now in that person's life. Like that athlete that I was coaching, it was really not about basketball. It was kind of a trick. I tricked you. I taught you about basketball, but what I really try to do is help you with life. And I think that's like the closest description to what I'm trying to do. Like I find coaching to be just a really fun thing, because this is about people's lives. Like financial independence is what we think it is. Really, like it's been my goal for a long time. And so accomplishing it seemed to be the main goal. But as I started doing better with that, it was really about me becoming a better person. It was about me being a better father, about me being a better husband, about me being a better community member. And so like, it's kind of like a puzzle. Like you solve one puzzle and you start pulling on that thread. And then there's all these other things that like are really about you and your life and kind of your legacy and your personal philosophy. And so I find that kind of cool to be able to help people do that and have fun with it. And I don't know where it's going to lead, but I'm having fun with it for now.
And I think that's great. A lot of times when I sit next to Pete at classes when we're both students. Like I sit next to him. He's a pretty prolific like note taker. That's also very fun to watch. But when we talked about the starter, builder, and ender, one of the lessons I learned from him was in a class, someone was talking about that. And in the ender phase, he said, he bit a big words. He said, fulfillment, ? What is going to be your fulfillment when you're an ender? Because money can provide you with things and time and stuff like that. But at the same time, you've got to find something for that fulfillment. And it looks like a lot of different things for different people. It sounds like this is one thing that it looks like for you as well.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, or you and Pete did, because ultimately that's the ultimate currency. It's like you're here on this earth. Like, what are you going to do to help other people? What are you going to do to be fulfilled yourself? Right. Money's just a tool. Money's going to help you get there. But like that's a bigger picture question that's fun for all of us to figure out. And we can't give advice because that's a personal thing. And the best I can say, like my motto for Coach Carson is do what matters. Like it's a value question. Like what matters to you? Like, what are you going to do with your life? How are you going to spend your time? Let's do more of that. Do more of that thing that's important to you. Let's do less of the stuff that's not important. And money can help you do that. Money can give you options. Real estate can give you flexibility. And it's fun. It's fun to see people get that, build their wealth, and then see what they do with it. Like, because there's teachers out there, there's radio broadcasters, there's podcasters, there's moms and dads, there's preachers, there's a lot of things people should be doing that they like have a calling to do that would fulfill them, but they're stuck in a job doing something else that's really not that fulfilling.
It's the idea of, I don't remember who said it, but it was people who said, don't die with the book inside of you, right? Like, like there's that idea that you have a message to put out, you have people to help, but don't die with it left still inside of you. So I love that. So with that being said, as we start to wrap this up, you've got different resources for folks. So let's kind of talk through them. So we've got the 2 books. So the small and mighty real estate investor, as well as Retire Early with Real Estate. Is the best place for people to go is just like Bigger Pockets or Amazon?
Yeah, either one. They're on Audible as well. The first book I read, so you could get my Southern accent on the Retire Early with Real Estate, but they hired an actor or somebody to read my second one. So yeah, whatever it's worth, he did a good job. But yeah, the books are on Bigger Pockets. If you want to get some of like the bonuses and things, like in the first book I did an interview with John Schaub is a bonus on the Retire Early with Real Estate, and then there's some other cool kind of like there's a graphic that shows like different ways people retired in the small and mighty portfolios, and I analyze those portfolios.
Yeah.
But wherever you like to buy them, it's out there, and I really appreciate it if people want to connect on with the books.
Okay, excellent. So so you've got a podcast. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, every Monday. This is kind of what I spend a lot of my time doing. Every Monday, I publish a new episode. Many of those are conversations with people, and we're having conversations about whether you should pay off debt or not. How do you do that? What are good ways to acquire properties in 2024? Property management. I talk a lot about maintenance, a lot of the nitty gritty kind of operating kind of stuff that we've talked about. And so every Monday it comes out. You can watch it on YouTube. It's called the Real Estate Investing with Coach Carson podcast, but you can search for Coach Carson on YouTube. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on all the podcast platforms. And yeah, would love to. It's more of a long form, so if you just want to, some of them are 30 minutes, some of them are 60 minutes. But yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, I would love to connect with you on that too.
Well, excellent. And then so you've got your YouTube. There's some additional resources on there, and your website has a lot of resources as well. I saw that, and so. Where's the best place for someone to get in touch with you if they're like, hey, I either want to reach out to you, want to learn more about you? Where's the best place you would send them?
Yeah, whatever people prefer. Like if you like listening to podcasts, but if you, I do an email newsletter as well. That's probably the easiest way to you could reply to my newsletter, and that goes to me, and I could get your message. So if you go to my website, coachcarson.com, and you can, on the first page there's several places to put your email in there. And then I also have a real estate investing toolkit. It's like some free stuff, some contracts and some spreadsheets and different things that you can get. So yeah, all that's free, and would love to connect with you. And whatever the easiest thing you like to read, you like to listen, you like to watch, I'm just trying to make as much content that's helpful out there that people can absorb, and would love to connect with anybody.
Well, look, and I appreciate that. Look, there's enough content out there that's people in front of Lamborghinis. That's people who are like, this is my maybe, rented jet for the day, whatever. I really appreciate, one of the things is I appreciate you coming on the show, because again, I do want to highlight here on the podcast is, I have a lot of interviews that I've done with, these old school guys. I had interviewed John and interviewed Pete. There's a handful of others I've interviewed. But I want, one of the biggest things I want is for this mindset about real estate, this philosophy about real estate, to continue to live on. And it's got to live on in human beings and how they approach real estate. And so my goal is just to continue to plant the seed, so more people, like you said, coach them to where 10 to 20 years from now, we can see people who sound like Jack and sound like Pete, that they were influenced, long after they're gone.
You're doing great work. I love what you're doing with the podcast. I'm really glad it's in existence, and I was so impressed to see, the craft and the work you're doing. So I love it. Look forward to staying in touch with you, and I'll be sharing the work you're doing too, because I think it's excellent.
Well, look, man, I appreciate it. Guys, if you want to get in touch with them, obviously we'll put in the show notes all those different ways that you can. But thanks again for tuning to another episode, guys. Chad, thanks for joining, and we're looking forward to maybe having you on again. We can have some more conversations.
Anytime. Thank you, Courtney.